arguably inserting itself into the legislative branch, although, again, the Constitution is ambiguous about this, and it would probably end up before the Supreme Court. Because we just don't know.
Okay.
And how the Supreme Court is going to rule, I mean, you've got a couple of people on the Supreme Court. You've got Gorsuch and Coney Barrett, who both call themselves textualists as well as originalists, which means whatever the plain language of the Constitution says, that's what we're going to do. Well, the Constitution's plain language says the Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate. And then on the other hand, it also says that the Senate can make its own rules. So, we may be go ahead.
She can't monitor key bills to get a debate going then, right?
I don't know. I mean, this is one of those areas where it has, in 240 years, it's never been tested. Just like, a couple of years ago, in 240 years, there had never been a time when the Senate said, we're going to refuse to consider a presidential nomination for the Supreme Court or for over 100 other federal judgeships. And, Mitch McConnell pulled that thing off, and I think he had no authority to do it, but he did it. So, anyhow, Rhea, I got to move along. Thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. Bob in Portland. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, thank you, Tom. Listen, looking at the Article 3 here, I see that the Vice President shall be, the President of the Senate. And the next statement is that she shows that she continues in that position. In the absence of the Vice President, they'll have a pro tem. But so what I see here is a mandate that, according to the opening statement, to secure prosperity and so forth and so on, the people speak, and there's 6 million other people that have spoke. She should go into the Senate and say, I'm here as a mandate. The American public has voted us in, and because of that, I am going to establish for the first time what it means to be the President of the Senate. And in other words, she should just stick right to the Constitution and go for it, like someone said.
Right, and here's the question:
your show.
If Mitch McConnell was the Vice President, what would he do? He would do this.
Same thing. Take control.
He would do it. Go in and take names and kick ass. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm gonna, as I said, I'm gonna do some research on this afternoon. I'll report back tomorrow. I believe Mark Pocan is going to be with us for the first hour tomorrow, taking your calls. And we're heading toward Thanksgiving. So, but anyway, good. We'll continue the conversation. Thanks so much for being with us today. Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Seriously. It all begins when you get active. So get out there, get active, tag, do your end. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and people around you. We all need it. Thank you. See you later.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
As a Texas high schooler many moons ago, I was the 115-pound outside linebacker on the Denison Yellow Jackets football team. Go Bugs! We won very few games, but we had spirit and some fun. Our coach, a down-to-earth fellow, paid a modest public school salary, tried to instill a bit of the sporting ethic in us.
These
Win or
companies
lose, give it
support
your
the
best.
Thom Hartmann
There is no
Program.
I in
They
team,
are
stuff like
X-Chair,
that.
changing the
So,
world
send
of
me out
seating.
bounds in
More
the game of
info
life,
at
but I'm somewhere between
xchairtom.com.
sad and disgusted that the self-centered corporate ethic, survival
Gabby.com.
of the
Gabby
greediest,
takes the
is
pain out of
becoming
shopping
the
for
guiding
insurance.
spirit of even
More
amateur
info
games.
at
The decline is most
gabby.com/Tom.
prevalent in big-time football programs where
Hello
coaches
Fresh,
make millions
delivering
while
fresh
the actual
ingredients and
athletes are paid
mouth-watering
nothing and
recipes.
face crippling,
More
even
info at
life-threatening injuries.
hellofresh.com,
But when the
code
pandemic
Tom.
slammed into college
Bowl and
budgets,
Branch,
squeezing
crafted
out
for the common
professors,
good.
students,
More
workers,
information
the
at
old school spirit kicked in,
bowlandbranch.com,
and
code
coaches may
Tom.
gladly publicize
ExpressVPN, the
sacrifices,
VPN that
accepting
just
pay cuts of
works.
15 to
More
20%.
info at
Only
expressvpn.com/Tom.
it was a scam.
And CB Distillery,
Haircuts
CBD
only
for
apply to
sleeping.
their base
More
salary,
info
not
at
the full compensation they
cbdistillery.com,
actually get.
code Tom.
North Carolina coach Mac Brown, for example, draws $7,000 a year.
Caracas Syndrome, Apocalypse, War, and
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
Professor Richard Wolff is going to drop by for a few minutes at the beginning of the second hour of the program today to talk about the lessons we can learn from other countries about how to deal with the COVID, how to salvage an economy after a pandemic. And there are reports out of Israel, multiple reports out of Israel, that the Israeli Defense Force has been put on high alert, anticipating the possibility of the Trump administration attacking Iran on the way out. And so what impact will that have on the world's economy, we'll ask Professor Wolff. And my rant from today about stopping Republicans from helping Trump poison the wells and salt the fields of America. And I'll share all that with you in the next hour. But our first hour on Wednesday, here is Congressman Mark Pocan, taking your calls for the hour at 202-808-9925. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the state of Wisconsin in the 2nd District of the state of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website is Pocan, Pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Congressman Pocan, welcome back. What's on the top of your radar screen right now?
Well, first, happy Thanksgiving Eve as well. Hope everyone is staying close to home and being as safe as possible given our COVID numbers. Really, I think we finally are having some signal of transition. We're seeing some of the cabinet appointments out there. We're working on a lot of things trying to get a COVID bill between now and, the end of this session. But, just having Congress back in session last week brought more members having COVID. It's really difficult right now with the high numbers to do a lot of the work that we need to do. And certainly when you don't have a willing partner in Mitch McConnell, it's even tougher. So, we're glad to see the transition beginning, but it certainly is difficult, especially with a CR ending on December 11th, a continuing resolution that funds the federal government. Between COVID and that, we have a lot of work to do.
What are the realistic possibilities that Americans might see some relief? We got the CARES Act in, what was that, March? And didn't that run out around July or August? Or I'm sorry, I don't have the timetable right on the top of my head.
That's about. But there's different things that ended different times, but you're right. Some ended as early as the end of July, like for unemployment comp. We passed a bill in the House, the HEROES Act, in May to be that second bill. We've passed it a couple times, and yet the Senate, hasn't really come to the table. The White House has had some negotiations with Speaker Pelosi. I think there's two things that work maybe towards a good resolution, Tom. One is December 11th. We have to come to the table together to figure out how to fund government. That gives you an opportunity to, while people are at the table, talk about COVID. And two, the fact that there are now multiple vaccines look like they're coming forward. The amount of time that we need to plan anything for is shortened. So hopefully that will help the Republicans to move forward, even though I think a lot of this delay has caused a lot of hurt out there that wasn't needed.
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one. We are live, and it's Wednesday. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Lines are open at 202-808-9925. And to get started here, Ron is it Penyon, New York? Am I saying that right, Ron?
Yes, you are, Tom. Hi, Tom, and hi, Congressman. Hi, Congressman Pocan. My question is, when can we get Puerto Rico to become a state? if we can do this, we'll get 2 senators, and that would turn the Senate blue.
Yeah, I think, this answer will probably happen a lot for a lot of questions. It all depends on what happens in Georgia for many of these things to happen. I don't see Mitch McConnell, who doesn't pass any bills, really moving forward on statehood either for Puerto Rico or D.C. or anywhere. If Mitch McConnell is still in charge of the Senate, unlikely to happen, but all the more reason why those January 5th Georgia elections are going to really matter.
Apropos of that, I saw reporting this morning that all of the quite consequential states in terms of control of their legislatures by Republicans as a result of gerrymandering, states where the majority of the people vote for Democrats, thus you get a Democratic governor, whether it's North Carolina or Wisconsin or Michigan or, pick one, right? And yet the legislature is still controlled by Republicans, and a majority of Republicans represent the state in the U.S. House of Representatives purely because of gerrymandering. That so much of Charles Koch and his buddies' money, he's got a new book out kind of trying to rehabilitate himself, but it's, I have it. Right. I got it yesterday. I've been reading through it, and it's just, a lot of happy talk. But so much of that money, that right-wing billionaire money from the Koch network and other organizations, has been flowing into these state races, and always does in the years what do you call it? The even number, the years end with 0, the census years, excuse me, that they can use that census then to, to gerrymander. That's their opportunity to re-gerrymander the state, and they're going to make it even worse. They're getting far more surgical about this, drawing congressional districts that include, in some cases, slicing right through the middle of a block just to include some houses. I mean, this has been a strategy, a strategic plan that the Republicans put in place. It was called Red Map, 20 years ago? Do the Democrats have anything comparable to this?
Well, we've got bills, including H.R. 1, that would actually get rid of the ability for politicians to gerrymander. It would go towards the citizen model, and it would help to make sure that we wouldn't have this problem. Having said that, I'll go back to the answer on the last question. With Mitch McConnell in charge of the Senate, there's no way that will pass because they want to take advantage of that. Now, a number of those states, though, the good news, Tom, is this time have a Democratic governor, even with that gerrymandered legislature, and the governor can either veto or have some impact on the map. So we're in a better place than we were 10 years ago. But still, what you said is absolutely right. Wisconsin's one of those states where more than 50% of the people vote for Democrats for the state assembly, for example, but we come out of it with 36 or 38 seats, almost a 15-point difference of where the votes are because of gerrymandering. And, but this time, in places like Wisconsin and other states now, there'll be a Democratic governor who can potentially veto maps, and then it goes to the courts. And then a lot's going to depend on what happens there. So hopefully we won't be in as bad of a place as 2010 when we had that devastating rout that was right before the redistricting. But still, no question, many forces put a lot of money into trying to manipulate this.
Yeah. Jared in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Congressman Pocan, and happy Thanksgiving to both of you. I am deeply concerned about this news I'm hearing about the Trump administration and Iran, and I'm wondering, what can we do to stop a war if they do initiate the first strike? Because, there's, this whole, why does the president have this kingly-like power to start wars? Why has Congress completely not held, these presidents accountable to this, international break of law, which is a Nuremberg war crime offense? Thank you, and have a good day.
Yeah, so, Jared, you are correct that it is Congress's duty, according to the Constitution, to go to war, except in certain instances, right? And that's what I think Donald Trump often looks for. If you can prove that they've attacked us, then he gets a chance to kind of move ahead. He still is supposed to come to Congress, but that would give him some wiggle room in doing something. But, what we heard right now about the Israeli military certainly, makes us concerned. I would hope that, now that people are starting to tell Donald Trump he lost the election, even if he won't use those words, there may be some opportunities to try to influence whatever he could possibly do. But we need to fix our authorization to go to war, period, in Congress.
Amen. Congressman Mark Pocan, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus representing Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives, taking your calls for the hour at 202-808-9925. Back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It is Thanksgiving Eve, and it's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And welcome back. Ed in Los Angeles, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, I thank you for taking my call. Happy Thanksgiving to both of you, and thank you, Congressman, for your service to our country. Question I have for you is this. If the Democrats fail to take the Senate, can President-elect Biden, when he gets into office, sign any executive orders to provide any financial relief for us? Because I'm facing homelessness in about 3 months, and a moratorium on evictions would sure help me. I'll take my answer off the air. And again, happy Thanksgiving to you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, and to you as well. So let me answer it this way. There is a lot that he can do with executive order, but you can't necessarily do things as easily with money, right? Because otherwise Donald Trump would have put more money towards his wall, but he had a very difficult time. So it is hard for you to see financial assistance come through executive order. Having said that, the president does still have a lot of power through executive orders, and hopefully he will use them aggressively to fix whatever needs to be fixed, especially around COVID, as we have a vaccine starting to get out, but people are hurting so very badly. My hope is still that we'll be able to get something done, hopefully, and maybe in line with the December 11th continuing resolution in order to keep government open. But it's hard for a president to move money, just doesn't have that authority that's generally in the hands of Congress.
Karen in Oakland, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, good morning, Tom and Congressman Pocan. Thank you for having me today. I was appalled during the Obama administration and now with Mitch McConnell just blocking action from the House of Representatives. I mean, I was wondering what we could do about that, and then I heard about the writ of mandamus, ordering a public official to carry out the acts of their job, what they're supposed to do. Why hasn't anyone taken advantage of that writ where they can order him to do his job, basically?
Yeah, what I often find is many of these solutions that people come up with sound good on paper but aren't practical for other reasons, because, trust me, we would make Mitch McConnell do something if we at all had that possibility. We literally have sent hundreds of bills, bipartisan bills, from the House to the Senate, and he apparently, like I often say, puts them in the back of a truck, drives them to Kentucky, and buries them in someone's backyard. We never see them again. And, he has to do something around the government funding, which maybe gives us an opportunity around COVID. But otherwise, if he wants to have very little to show for the Senate, he often can do that. There's certain must-pass pieces of legislation, but he does have an awful lot of power in that role. So, I think we're always looking at every possible way we can try to do something. I'm hoping that Joe Biden, because he does know how to, reach out to people across the aisle, can maybe break some people off. But Mitch McConnell, I doubt, is going to suddenly be, the hero in any narrative that's going to move forward.
Yeah, and isn't a writ of mandamus typically used? A judge would order, for example, the guy who's in charge of the waterworks in the city, who's slacking off on his job to, restore water service to some houses or something. I mean, typically that's how it's used, is it not?
Yeah, because you can't force the Senate to vote yes on a bill, right? They can just as easily say no, right? So it's just not really going to work. And, but we'll try other things to try to get them to the table. It's been very difficult.
Yeah, I gotcha. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the True People's Media. Congressman Pocan's website is Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep Mark Pocan, R-E-P like Representative Mark, M-A-R-K, Pocan, P-O-C-A-N. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. Did you know that 100 police officers, and the last year we have statistics for is 2017, so we'll use that. 100 police officers were killed by firearms during that year. Now, some were suicides, some were accidental shootings. A few of them were bad guys killing cops. 100. 1,000 of our soldiers all around the world were shot dead in 2017. 1,000. A little more dangerous, apparently, to be a soldier than to be a cop. But apparently, the most dangerous position in the United States is not being a police officer on the front lines. It's not being a soldier on the front lines of combat. It's being a child. School-aged children killed by firearms in 2017, 2,462 of them. We have a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com about this situation and what we can do about it. You can check it out there. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. And Don in West Desert, Utah, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, Tom. And Congressman, I have a question about the open sky policy treaty that the president unilaterally just withdrew us from, as well as destroying and dismantling the 2 Air Force planes that serve this. Is this illegal by the president? I thought he was supposed to go through Congress on these international treaties.
I think when it comes to treaties, that is one of the areas he does have some additional powers, as opposed to before when we were talking with someone about when it comes to fiscal issues, it's much more difficult. But, what we're afraid of is that issues like this and other issues, if Joe Biden wants to go in a very different direction, it's going to be very hard for him if the president, right now, the President Trump does too many actions. So, unfortunately, he's got so many days left. The good news is he's been a crybaby for the last several weeks, and that's reduced his ability to get some things done. But, I think we are going to see a lot, from pardons to other actions, and hopefully not any kind of military action. I think that's one of the biggest things that we're watching and very nervous about moving forward. But he's still president until January 20th.
Yeah. Bruce in Racine, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, good morning. I'm down in the 1st District in Wisconsin. I was looking at a story in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel this morning about the Wisconsin Voters Alliance apparently has filed a suit petitioning the Supreme Court to basically throw out the votes of Wisconsin in the presidential election and give that option to the Republican legislature. Could you comment on that, sir?
Yeah, I think this is not that different than the lawsuits in a lot of states that are all being done because the fragile snowflake that is known as Donald Trump was melting, and people had to do a few things to make him, not throw a fit. And that we've watched those cases all pretty much lose state after state after state. In Wisconsin, even Scott Walker said it's unlikely that there's going to be a change because of how we do our elections. So, Bruce, I think this is just yet another lawsuit trying to somehow claim that Donald Trump didn't really lose. That's why Donald Trump will probably not be a good sport and concede. They'll try to, say that Joe Biden's not really president. But we've seen this before, and I think we're not shocked to see that lawsuit proceeding. But I wouldn't worry too much about it, Bruce, because based on every other lawsuit we've seen in all these other states, they're not based on anything. There's not like a gotcha there, and especially in Wisconsin, we run our elections pretty cleanly.
Jason in Pontiac, Michigan, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Earlier, I heard that that lady mentioned something about the writ of mandamus or whatever that was, and I was curious. Short of that, if that doesn't work, is there anything that President Biden can do to kind of force the hand of Mitch McConnell should we lose the Senate? Because I'm sure I'm speaking for the majority of people listening, and that I'm getting sick and tired of nothing being done in the Senate. So that's all I really have to say. And again, thank you guys for what you do.
Thank you, Jason.
Sure, Jason, thank you. And you bring up a really great point. There's a number of things I think you can try, and it depends. All these other people who want to be president, how they decide to behave, because already that next campaign has started. Apparently, when you watch some of the Senate Republicans, but Joe Biden can try to appeal to some Republicans to peel them off, and there's plenty of things he can do that could be advantageous for them. He can try to embarrass them in their states. He can try to use his bully pulpit to try to push them, which, again, the president's bully pulpit is 100 times Nancy Pelosi's or anyone in Congress's, right? So it's a powerful bully pulpit he'll have. So there's a lot of different things that we can try or that he will try. But if they just don't want to do anything, elections are unfortunately the best that we have. And unfortunately, Kentucky decided Mitch McConnell was the guy they wanted to have come back as senator. And, but the pressure can happen in a lot of other ways. And I think Joe Biden is probably the most experienced person to know how to apply that pressure.
Yeah, we just have 40 seconds. Lyndon Johnson was, he was the former majority leader of the Senate, and as president was famous for getting his way. Just sometimes using pure political force. Do you see any way that Biden could, for example, shame Republicans into doing something? That the power of public opinion might be so great that he could bring it to bear.
Yeah, I do think. I mean, there even if it's not going to be Mitch McConnell that's going to shame, you can shame some of the members to pressure Mitch McConnell, and I think that may be your best efforts. But at some point, I mean, the public, regardless, wants us to act even more than they care about the left-right spectrum, and there is some public pressure that can certainly happen as well.
Yeah, well, let's hope. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And we'll be back right after this break at the bottom of the hour with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. Stick around. The Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from the Strip and Flip Selection, as opposed to Election, of 2016, 5 Jim Crows and Electronic Election Theft, by Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman. This is from the chapter Part 1, page 15, Strip. The foundation of election theft is the manipulation of race as a divide-and-conquer strategy. It began with the first Jim Crow chattel slavery. Slavery in various forms has existed since the dawn of time, but in the colonies of British North America and then in the United States, it took on a uniquely virulent incarnation. Chattel slavery was, of course, a horrific, brutal labor system designed primarily in the American South to power a network of plantations that produced cotton, tobacco, indigo, rice, and other hot weather crops that could be grown in large fields. But it had a larger purpose here. Our peculiar institution, how the founders referred to slavery, was meant to divide black laborers from white in a caste system that would guarantee that they would never unite in rebellion. As we'll see, this originated with the infamous Bacon's Rebellion of 1675 in Virginia, in which indentured servants of both races joined forces. Plantation owners vowed to make sure that that never happened again. When the United States became an independent country, plantation owners also vowed to secure political benefits from their slaves. Thus, they wrote into the Constitution the 3/5 clause that gave slave owners additional representation for their slaves, even though those slaves could not vote. That additional vote count guaranteed that every president from Jefferson to Lincoln either owned slaves or his vice president did, and that the Congress was strongly controlled by slave owners right up to the outbreak of the Civil War. After the Civil War, with formal slavery abolished, a Jim Crow system of racial segregation overtook the South. Enforced by the Democratic Party and its Ku Klux Klan terror wing, white landowners updated the realities of slavery to again keep blacks and whites apart. The roots of racism since 1865 has been the treatment of legally freed African Americans as something less than human, guaranteeing all whites a sense of superiority and an economic leg up. When the populist and socialist movements that campaigned most powerfully from the 1880s to the 1920s worked to overcome this separation, they were hammered by the court and electoral systems through a series of stolen elections and twisted race-based legal decisions, and the fusion of the Democratic and Republican parties in the 1917 municipal races in the Northeast. Confirmed by the Supreme Court in the 1890s, this updated Jim Crow caste system again guaranteed that blacks in the South and parts of the North would not be allowed to vote, and that they would be carefully divided from whites by caste as well as class. Since 1970, the primary weapon for suppressing the minority vote has been the third Jim Crow, the drug war. In the tradition of Bacon's Rebellion and the populist socialist upheavals, blacks and whites once again began to unite during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1950s and 60s. In response, Richard Nixon's Republican Party invoked the divide and conquer war on drugs. Confronted with the liberalization of the Southern Democratic Party, Nixon feared that black votes might remake America's political map. In Republican eyes, there was only one solution: disenfranchise the African American population, along with young and Latino voters who were leaning strongly to the left. In 1972, Nixon pointedly ignored a powerful report from his own Blue Ribbon Schaefer Commission on drug use and escalated the attack on marijuana and other drugs. In the 45 years since, a staggering 41 million Americans have been arrested for pot or other controlled substances. That's a number of human beings that exceeds the populations of more than 150 other countries worldwide. It has left the United States with the largest prison population in the history of the modern world, while having little or no impact on the actual use of drugs. As Michelle Alexander has shown in her landmark book, The New Jim Crow, the majority of those incarcerated have been black and Latino, with a devastating impact on our elections. Millions of these mostly young, mostly male citizens have been stripped of their right to vote, as well as their ability to maintain families, obtain work, and meaningfully participate in the political lives of their communities. All this has been by design. Once again, a new Jim Crow policy has been delegated by a ruling elite to strip our non-white population of its ability to exercise its fair share of power in our electoral process and to unite with whites in political action. In the 1890s, rising industrial interests committed the nation to a fourth Jim Crow, a course of race-based global empire. The U.S. already had a history of foreign intervention, dating to Thomas Jefferson's 1803 use of our fledgling Navy to fight pirates along the coast, the shores of Tripoli, of what's now called Libya. That was followed by the conquest of the North American continent with genocidal warfare used against the indigenous peoples who had lived here for 20,000 years. By the 1890s, when the frontier consumed, America's giant corporations began to expand overseas. They started with Hawaii, a constitutional monarchy, and then pushed into Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and beyond. And in all cases, these interventions involved the white-ruled U.S. interfering with the political systems of non-white countries. In discussing this fourth Jim Crow, we include an extensive, though not complete, list of these interventions. It underscores the reality that our own political system has become an imperial juggernaut, with the inevitable blowback bound to obliterate any residual pretense to real democracy at home. Generally, there's been an attempt to portray these interventions as benign, meant to bring democracy, progress, and the Christian faith to third world nations. In fact, they've been largely economic in purpose, a dollar democracy to grab other people's resources. The strip and flip selection of 2016 by Bob Petrakis and Harvey Walser. On this week's Science Revolution, why are the Republicans saying the mask mandate is anti-freedom? If you're hooked up to a ventilator and you can't breathe, you're not free. The Republican idea of freedom is literally killing us. Nick Dearden with Global Justice Now joins me to ask who should own the COVID vaccine that was funded by we the people. Plus, Teresa Brown, RN, author of Critical Care, drops in to explain why the COVID task force needs nurses. There's a lack of nursing representation despite their essential and visible role on the front line of this national pandemic, and that needs to be fixed ASAP. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin, taking your calls for the hour. And Congressman, if I may take a moment of host's privilege here and ask you a question on behalf of myself that's a little complex. I got into this quite a bit on the air yesterday, and then I spent the entire afternoon and half the evening last night reading the rules of the Senate, printing out and hundreds of pages, reading the rules of the Senate, reading James Madison's, notes from the debates in the Constitutional Convention, and also reading the history of individual vice presidents, starting with John Adams. And here's what I found. The Constitution says that, and I quote, this is Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5A, the Senate shall choose their other officers and also a president pro tempore, in other words, a sitting president, a temporary acting president, in the absence of the vice president, or when he shall exercise the office of President of the United States. So, in other words, and you go back to the original debates, and the assumption was that the vice president would have principally a legislative job while being the president in waiting. They would be the person who runs the Senate. You go to the Senate rules, and the question I'm getting to, and I'll just hit it right off. You go to the Senate, is it possible that Kamala Harris, as vice president, can simply walk in and say, Mitch, you're not in charge anymore. I am the president of the Senate according to the United States Constitution, and I'm going to take that role. The rules of the Senate start out, in the absence of the vice president, the Senate shall choose a president pro tem who shall hold the office and execute the duties thereof during the pleasure of the Senate and until another is elected or his term of office as senator expires. And then the second, rule number 2, this is appointment of a senator to a chair. In the absence of the vice president and pending the election of a president pro tem, the acting president pro tem shall, or the secretary of state shall perform the duties of the chair. And it goes through this whole long list, and every single one of them is in the absence of the vice president. John Adams actually presided over the Senate. Thomas Jefferson, when he became vice president in the Adams administration, basically hated John Adams, was a different political party, didn't want to have anything to do with anything political, and he spent most of his time as vice president writing what are now the rules for the Senate and the House, which include the stuff I just read to you. After Jefferson's presidency, vice presidents started presiding over the Senate again and continued to right up until around 1890, when vice presidents just said, okay, that's it, and there were times when they did and didn't, and sometimes there was conflict around it and sometimes there wasn't. But to the best of your knowledge, has anybody raised this? And I realize you have access to the House parliamentarian. I don't know if you do to the Senate parliamentarian. But is this viable? Mitch McConnell, and the other thing about the rules of the Senate that I learned doing a real deep dive into some constitutional scholars is that while the House actually has fairly rigid rules, the Senate's rules, most of the way that the Senate operates, for example, the whole concept of the leader of the majority party being the person who determines the Senate schedule, that's not in the rules. That's simply tradition. Just like the leader of the Senate shall hold hearings and allow a vote on the president's nomination of a person for the Supreme Court. McConnell came out and said, hey, that's not in the rules. It's not even it's not in the Constitution, it's not in the rules, so I'm just going to ignore it. So, to my question, do you think that Kamala Harris could take over the Senate?
So I'm sure since you've said it that someone's looking into it, right? I have not heard this previously, anyone talking about that. I think when you get to the rules, it gets really complicated. We're having an issue right now with technically January 3rd is the transition for the new Congress, of which they were trying to do the swearing in on the 6th. But if you could have a fight that says you have to do it on the 3rd, which would mean there are some issues about getting members in and a lot of things, especially during the times of COVID, where member absences are certainly going to be a little more prevalent, we're finding, as members have been getting COVID lately. So we're trying to work through those rules on the House side now. I haven't even begun to look at any Senate rules, having not served there. But I think just the fact that you brought it up, my guess is there are people who are looking at it, but I have not heard this raised as any possibility. Again, probably for the same reason we talked about. Sometimes something looks good, like technically on paper, and there is another very good, valid reason why it can't happen. But let's hope people are looking at it.
Well, 10 years ago, I don't think anybody would have thought if the president nominates a member of the Supreme Court, 9 months before the end of his term, the Senate will simply refuse to even interview the guy. And that's in the Constitution also. So if you run it by anybody and if you hear anything, let me know. I'm going to be working on this this weekend, and I'll probably publish an op-ed about it next week. So just heads up. Okay. Back to our phone calls. My apologies. Douglas in Dooley, Arizona. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Dewey, Arizona. Yeah, my question would be to the senator: is it possible to overturn Judge Scalia's decision to cut the Voting Rights Act, and why couldn't Congress do a campaign showing what idiots these Republicans are, and do you want to be remembered for running, trying to overturn the election in this last Senate? And I'll hear your answer off the air.
Yeah, Douglas, thanks for the question. I mean, so first of all, I'm in the House, just for full clarity, so I'm not as good at Senate rules and things coming from the House side. But I can tell you that what we're watching right now is just embarrassing on multiple fronts. People who I think generally had some respect, even if we disagreed ideologically with them, who are still trying to cater to the president so he doesn't write a mean tweet. I mean, it's like we're in some bad high school sitcom where you've got to keep that spoiled, head cheerleader happy, or else she's going to get you in trouble with the rest of the class. And that's what's kind of happening. So you watch Marco Rubio and other people that have a modicum, at least, of respect, throwing that respect out because they still maybe want to be president in 4 years, and they have to, continue to kiss the melting ring of the snowflake named Donald Trump. So I wish there was more that we could do when it comes to those folks. And we have tried. I don't think there is embarrassment anymore for them, right, because of what they're doing. I mean, look at Lindsey Graham. If there was embarrassment, Lindsey Graham would be, a human red color all the time, and yet instead he continues to suck up to the president relentlessly and pathetically. So, unfortunately, Douglas, we're at a weird period of time. I'm hoping that when Donald Trump is gone, the more time that expires, the more people go back to operating like normal. But the last 4 years have been truly extraordinary in my living adult time of watching what's happened in Congress and the Senate.
Jan in St. Louis, Missouri. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Tom and Congressman Pocan. I'm very concerned about the re-election in January in Georgia. I'd like to know if the DNC is doing all they can to get the two Democratic senators elected. I don't see too much going on TV about it. I see Tom Perez talking, but he seems to talk in circles. I'm not really impressed whenever I see him on the TV talking about this election. So I'd like to know what the DNC is doing, because if we don't get those two in Congress, we're going to be sitting like Obama was for 4 years with Biden. Thank you. I'll take my answer off the air. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is working on it clearly. That is the only thing, the only show between now and January 5th, and it's the weight of the Senate with a Democratic president, Democratic House. So clearly there are many efforts going on. I think what you're maybe seeing less of it, Jan, because the message has been sent pretty clearly. They don't want people like myself or others around the country to go to Georgia to help on the campaign, because this has to be a Georgia election. And if we do that, we try to show that others are trying to influence it, that will be the worst thing that could possibly happen for our two Democratic nominees. So that message has been sent very clearly. So people like myself may help to talk to people who can help raise money and do other things that can be helpful, but they do not want to have this a nationalized campaign. They want to keep this a Georgia-specific campaign, and given that, I think we have to respect the fabulous work already we've seen of Stacey Abrams and others.
1 minute to the break. Mike in Hope Sound, Florida. You got a quick one for Congressman Pocan?
Yep, I got a quick one. What happens to these partisan hacks such as DeJoy, and more importantly, the head of the board of governors of the Postal Service? Robert Duncan. He's a Republican fundraiser, one of the biggest ones in history, and he's sitting there in a supposed nonpartisan position. So I'll take my call off the air. And by the way, Tom, that was a great question about McConnell.
Thank you, Mike.
So, Mike, the good news is the president appoints the Board of Governors, therefore they appoint the Postmaster General. There's something in place that Joe Biden can do. The bad news, I should tell you, is Darrell Issa won a congressional seat coming back to Congress, and he's probably the lead person in Congress trying to privatize the Postal Service, and he is he's relentless on this effort. So there will be new attacks all over again we're going to have to endure from Republicans.
And this is an attempt to privatize the post office?
Oh, privatize. He's tried to do everything to end six-day delivery, to make cluster boxes only, not individual boxes for people. Any effort he can to make them fail, he has tried to do.
Amazing. Amazing. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman in just a moment.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. George in Portland, listening on X-Ray FM. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, guys. Hey, Congressman, I was wondering if you floated the idea yet. I heard someone mention it last week about fireside chats. We're talking about forcing Republicans and embarrassing Republicans. I feel like we need transparency from Biden and from the administration and from Democrats. We need a connection, because as lame as it was, Trump had a connection to his followers via Twitter, minute by minute practically, and we've never seen anything like that before. So can we get some sort of a connection from Biden?
Yeah. So, George, I thought that was a great suggestion last week. And I think one thing that we do know is whoever's the president has the world's biggest bully pulpit, right? So Joe Biden will have that. One of his strongest qualities is his empathy, right? I think he really comes across in a very genuine, authentic, sincere way. And I think that will connect with people. How he does that, I'm not sure. I think the fireside chat is a great idea because it's that informal setting. It reconnects what we lost for 4 years with Donald Trump. But whatever effort they do, I do think you'll see that in Joe Biden, a real serious ability to connect with people. And whether or not that changes some of the people who are, just afraid that America's changing and don't like people with black or brown skin, I don't know. But let's just hope. Let's just hope that for the better side of America's spirit.
Ron in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Happy Thanksgiving to both of you. Congressman, how are the Democrats, with all this energy from the last election, how are they going to turn the tables on what the Republicans have done for 30 years? How are we going to play the long game?
Yeah, Ron, so, let me give you some reality, unfortunately, that's not as good news. We may only have a 4-seat or so majority in the House, which is going to make things enormously difficult. We may not have the Senate if we don't pick up the Georgia seats. What we have is the White House. Now, that was the bad news. The good news is there is enormous power to whoever's president through executive orders, agency rules, other actions, the bully pulpit, go on and on and on. So we are really going to rely on that. That's one of the reasons why we had Elizabeth Warren last Sunday talking to some of our progressive incoming freshmen, and she said personnel is policy. It's important who gets some of these positions right now, and that's why many of us are speaking out on that, because if we can get good people in those appointed positions, that is also in many ways like doing good policy, because it's going to be hard to see the legislative victories given the reality of a 4-seat potential margin in the House and not potentially having the Senate.
Wasn't it extraordinary yesterday when he introduced his first 6 cabinet members that none of them said, President-elect Biden, thank you so much. You are so wise. I'm so grateful. We are so honored to have your leadership. None of them felt like they had to give him a tongue bath, like remember when Trump announced his cabinet?
Well, and they all were so intelligent and had actual backgrounds in what they're doing, as opposed to, someone that, can tolerate being near Donald Trump. That seemed to be the highest qualifier to be on the cabinet or in senior positions with Donald Trump. So big difference already.
Yeah, it's remarkable to watch and encouraging. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan in just a moment. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. I'm speaking at the Bioneers 2020 conference. It's running December 5th and 6th and 12th and 13th. My keynote is how all life is organized around democracy. Tickets are available at Bioneers.org, and there's a 20% discount with the code TOM, T-H-O-M. So John Kasich was recently on CNN talking about how Democrats need to be listening to rural America, words to that effect. No, I think Democrats need to be talking to rural America and reminding rural America that it was a Democratic president that got them Social Security. It was a Democratic president that brought electricity to rural America, the RTA through, or the REA rather through the Franklin Roosevelt administration. It was the Democratic Party who brought phones to rural America. It was the Democratic Party that brought Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and public education to rural America, subsidized all those things. Democrats don't need to be listening to rural America. They need to be talking to rural America. There's over 1,500 right-wing radio stations in rural America talking smack all the time, 24/7, and none in rural America carrying a progressive message. That's what Democrats need to be paying attention to. You can check out our new video on this over at TomHartmann.com. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls, and Jim in Riverview, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good day, Tom, and good day, Congressman Pocan. You know, Tom, you have brought out the frustration, and you've opened up the book to what everybody's thinking. Is there another way? Is there another way? Is there another way? Right. This guy has really messed things up, hasn't he? I mean, for everybody.
Yeah. So your question for the Congressman?
Tom and Congressman, especially for Congressman Pocan and everybody that's up in Washington. Congressman Pocan, Mitch McConnell hog-tied both Obama and Biden up for 6 years. They're now talking about budget constraints, and they need to get back to basics. And that, if they tie him up for 4 more years and we don't get a connection like you were talking about with the people, with Biden, like Trump tweeted every 2 minutes, which Biden's not going to have the time to do that. But if we don't get a connection, Trump is going to come back in 4 years. What can we do about that?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of things that can happen. Political years are like dog years, so 4 years is like 28 years as far as I'm concerned. You know, who knows where Donald Trump will be, and who knows how many legal cases and other things will be happening in between. But I that's the problem. If the Senate doesn't start to work, we're going to have some real difficult times. And we're such a narrowly divided government in both the House, too. I mean, a 4-seat margin out of as many seats, 435 seats, is really dangerously small. So it's going to be difficult. So we're going to really rely on what Joe Biden can do. The good news is, you know, he's got more experience than probably anyone who's gone into that office knowing how to do the job. So I'm hopeful that will work well. I'm hopeful that good people will be brought into the administration so that we can get some things done. But, you know, Mitch McConnell, I'm guessing, will operate a little differently under Joe Biden than Donald Trump, because there he at least could pass confirmed judges, right? But and now he'll probably be in the mode to try to slow them down. So we'll have to see how he proceeds. But hopefully, you know, maybe some of the Mitt Romneys of the world and others who are, you know, willing to more quickly come to more normal terms will be possible to help break the logjam. But, you know, elections have consequences. That's the reality, and we have a very divided nation right now. Important, though, on the thing you said, Jim, about tweeting, Donald Trump actually got, I think, something like 10 million fewer votes than people who follow him on Twitter, and Joe Biden got more votes than people who follow him on Twitter. So I just thought that was interesting for all the people who talk about Donald Trump and Twitter. He couldn't even necessarily deliver the Twitter followers. Maybe that tells you something about the sewer that's known as Twitter.
Rich in Joliet, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you for your time, Congressman. I recently came down with the virus, and I work in a rail yard out here. And you know I hear this Heroes Act ain't going anywhere, and you know, because of Mitch McConnell, and he's covering all the big businesses, you know, that's saying, you know, you don't have to pay these people, you know. And here I am putting my life out on the line, you know, when I go to work, because I'm in a container place, which goods and services, you know, all goods are going through there. And, you know, and I'm going to, for 2 weeks now, I won't receive a check or anything like that. And if I go through my unemployment, that's going to take at least a month to go through. So now, you know, I'm wondering what we can do about maybe getting that HEROES Act through and helping people like me, you know, that live paycheck to paycheck.
You know, Rich, what people like you need to do, and that's most Americans are in your situation, is we just have to all call our senators and our representatives and say, you have to get a bill done, put pressure on them. If they hear it enough, again, if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. I don't expect Mitch McConnell to take leadership on this because, you know, he's been busy sucking up to Donald Trump and accepting all the lies about COVID the president's been saying. But when their constituents start calling and you start, you know, keeping track and you got 10-1 people saying pass the bill, suddenly some of these Republicans will gain a spine or decide they've come up with some reason to vote differently. But they need to hear from us, and that's what we all need to do. So fill their inboxes, you know, our inboxes. Call us, send us emails, but you've got to do those contacts. They're vitally important.
Congressman, we just have 45 seconds. What should we be looking at and doing in addition to what you just suggested in the coming week?
Well, and that's the big stuff that's moving, right? We have to get the bill to fund government post-December 11th. We need to try to get a COVID bill. We have an NDAA authorization that there's some issues that we're working through. But there's not a lot else that has to happen, so I don't expect a lot else to happen. But it is really crucial. If people want a COVID package, you need to reach out to your U.S. reps and your U.S. senators now and tell them that it's urgent and give your personal story. But get friends to do it. Volume matters, not loudness volume, but volume and how many contacts really will be effective, and that's the best thing we can do right now.
And the phone number for the Switchboard of Congress, where you can reach any member, is 202-224-3121. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you so much for being with us today. It's always great talking with you.
Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you and Louise and your family.
Well, thank you, and to you and yours, Congressman Mark Pocan. Pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are X-Chair, changing the world of seating. More info at xchairtom.com. Gabby.com. Gabby takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. Boll and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bollandbranch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.
Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War, the other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Thanksgiving Eve. On the line with us is Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of democracyatwork.info, author of numerous books. His latest, The Sickness is the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself. Democracyatwork.info and rdwolf with 2fs.com are his websites, so you can tweet him at Prof. Wolff, as in Professor Wolff. Professor Wolff, welcome back. I have kind of 2 questions for you. The first one, I've been reading about, how many European countries, Boris Johnson, for example, in the UK, put the UK back into lockdown, or at least England back into lockdown. And the government is providing everybody with 80% of whatever their paycheck was up to a certain, threshold. Without even going through the companies. What lessons can we learn from other countries about how to allow an economy to survive and then to salvage it afterwards as a consequence of a pandemic?
Well, I think the tough word that I'm going to use, however daring it may still be, is socialized medicine, for one. A socialized medicine system, whether it be a Medicare for All or the National Health Service in England or any of the equivalents across all other industrialized countries except the United States. What those socialized medical systems do is organize long before a virus hits, not only to handle it medically, to have stockpiles of all the requisite ventilators and masks and gloves and hospital beds, but likewise to have trained personnel, to have the stuff distributed properly where populations are concentrated, and then be able to mobilize really all the public and private resources needed to really wage war on a virus. We don't have any of that. We have blocked the development of a national health service. We've done it for decades, as you well know, and as you have documented. And so we are left flat-footed and unprepared in the manner of other countries. The same applies to economic downturns. I mean, I'm a professional economist. I can give you the dates every 4 to 7 years where every capitalist economy in the world has a downturn. We have words for that: recession, depression, bust, crash, collapse, downturn. I mean, the language is full because it's a regular recurring phenomena. You ought to be prepared. For example, if large numbers of people are suddenly rendered unemployed, give them governmental financial support so that their suffering of unemployment doesn't spread to knock out all the businesses that they would otherwise have no money to spend in if they're unemployed. I mean, that doesn't take rocket science to figure out. You have to have a program in place. You have to have the services that can deliver that kind of cash to people. All of those things are missing in countries where the word socialized is too close to socialism and is therefore a society that runs away from the collective organization that is required to be successful. And that's why, even in a country as close to us as the UK,
They still in all have a national Medicare for all, and they still in all have a powerful Labor Party tradition that means you've got to take care of workers. You can't let them, as we're doing right now in America, 25 million of them, simply go out there and be unemployed, facing a Thanksgiving and a Christmas where even the meager unemployment compensation is going to be taken away. It's beyond words for me, to be honest.
Yeah, this is somewhere between sad and outrageous, or both.
That's right.
I'm also reading this morning that the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, the Israeli military, is specifically preparing for Donald Trump to strike Iran before he leaves office. They're saying to the public, we're not doing this because we have, because Trump told us he's going to do this. We're just getting ready. And Pompeo is in the region, and he just repositioned B-52 bombers into the region, which were not there before. And I don't know if they're there yet or if they're on their way. If Donald Trump was to start a war with Iran, what impact would that have economically on the world and on the United States?
It would have multiple effects. One of the horrors of it is that many of them can't be known in advance. Iran is a major producer of oil. If you attack Iran, Iran will attack back. This is not an adversary poor and militarily unequipped, like, for example, Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya or Syria. This is a powerful, integrated, well-armed adversary, and it's going to be painful. Just as when Trump killed that Iranian general a couple of years ago, the Iranians immediately retaliated with a rocket attack on an American base, doing major damage, even though that was hidden for a while. You're going to see alliances brought into bear. The Russians are allied with the Iranians, linked to them militarily. I don't know, nor does Mr. Trump, how the Russians will react, especially at a time like this. I don't know how the Europeans, let's remember, we the U.S. withdrew from the Iran deal. The Europeans did not. The Europeans have good relations with Iran, are busily evading American sanctions so that they can expand their current business with Iran. They need Iran, and they will not be happy that once again the United States, acting unilaterally, damages them. We have very strained alliances with the Europeans, and those strains are going to go to the breaking point if anything like this sort of disruption were to occur in all of the expanded linkages that connect Iran with Europe. And finally, every other country in the world is going to look at the United States, particularly if this is done at a moment of regime change, as being so out of control, not only to have let Mr. Trump do his thing for 4 years, but to permit him to go out under these circumstances, provoking a war as if with COVID, the climate crisis, our internal racial conflicts, we don't have enough to struggle to cope with. It really, again, I like your language, is somewhere between sad and outrageous.
Yeah, and very concerning. We have about a minute and a half. I'm curious your thoughts on where our economy is going over the next few months.
Well, the British put out a statement today saying that their economy is in such bad shape that they expect the winter to be the worst, I'm quoting now, in 300 years. Our economy is now turning down because we did not learn the lesson that if you don't deal with this disease, it will drag your economy down. There is no trade-off here. You can't afford to reopen an economy at the same time that you don't have in place a fantastically more developed antiviral system than what we have. And now we're seeing the results. The so-called recovery is petering out. Unemployment is going up. Businesses are closing. The COVID is completely out of control and will now produce yet again economic turmoil. It really does make me the kind of person who just sort of shakes his head, hesitant to answer your perfectly reasonable question, because I don't want to depress everybody with the honest answer.
Yeah, it's somewhere between sad and outrageous. There you go.
Yeah, I wish you a happy Thanksgiving anyway.
Thank you, Professor Wolff, and thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, and thanks so much for being on the air with us so frequently, and today also. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Professor Wolff, we'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can also check out his website, democracyatwork.info, or rdwolf with 2fs.com. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Let's pick up some phone calls here. Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I want to give thanks for you and the whole crew for keeping us sane through these dark years that we've been passing. And just wanted to follow up on something you had on yesterday that I couldn't get in on about Trump's presidential library. I've sent an email to my Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, and it essentially says that since this is the first U.S. president to question the legitimacy of elections as deciding executive succession, and the first president to stage a coup attempt, that the United States should not in any way lend any recognition or support to anything that commemorates this administration and anything other than contempt and ridicule. And consequently, I think that the proper selection for a presidential library would be Philadelphia, namely the Fantasy Island Adult Bookstore, where Rudy Giuliani...
Across the street from Four Seasons?
Across from the Four Seasons. It could be used for the Trump Library. We could keep all the Stormy Daniels works that are already in it. And
the nudie pictures of Melania, too.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Give the lady a break. But
did you see where she's not, she's not even going to show up for the Christmas display at the White House this year? The First Lady's office is going to conduct a tour for the press, but she won't be there. It's like,
excellent sense on her part. And I think you should also have a waxwork of Rudy Giuliani in there, which would spill water-soluble hair dye down the cheeks every hour on the hour, and have a whole interpretive place there explaining how he went to Philadelphia with the purpose of revoking the citizenship of millions of African-American citizens in contravention of the 14th and 15th Amendments. It really was an astonishing sort of a turn by a president who came into office promising that if his opponent got the job, assassination was a legitimate question on the table. I mean, this person has been an enemy of the Constitution and of all laws throughout his administration, and the government should not do anything to support a library or worship spot which would do anything other than revile him the same way King John is reviled in England. Since he was forced in 1215 to issue Magna Carta, not one king in England has been named John, and I think we should similarly treat Donald John Trump.
That's interesting. Is there a parallel to that in American history? I guess Benedict Arnold is probably the most well-known one. Who, he was an American general. I believe he was a politician for a while, and turned out to be a traitor.
Yeah, well, they made the traitors much bigger in those days.
Yeah, there you go. They were at least intelligent men. Mike, thank you for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. It's 20 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Stick around. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast, 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. So here on the program recently, we had a fascinating conversation with Professor Richard Wolff about how banks have to keep basically 10% in reserve in case there's a run on the bank. Everybody wants their deposits back. The banks can lend out 90%, but they have to keep that 10% so they can pay you, give you your money back if you want it. Fannie and Freddie have a similar requirement in case mortgages go south. Mortgages did go south in 2008. Fannie and Freddie couldn't cover the shortfall, and as a result, they collapsed. And you and I, had to pay $190 billion to bail them out. Well, back then, their reserve requirement was 45 cents on $100. Now it's 19 cents on $100. Our special members-only riff you can find over at thomhartmann.com is all about this, what it means, where it could go, and what we can do about it. So check it out at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. There's a lot going on in the news today. I shared with you in the last hour. I was thinking out loud about this on the air yesterday about, could Kamala Harris, the Constitution says that the vice president basically has two jobs. Number one, the vice president is the president in waiting. John Nance Garner, I believe it was, said that the vice presidency wasn't worth a warm bucket of spit, or words to that effect. Because it was just like, hey, sit around waiting. But the other job that the vice president is given by the Constitution is president of the Senate. And when the president of the Senate is not there, that is the vice president, then the president pro tem, which is Latin for during a period of time or for a period of time, the president pro tem fills in for the president of the Senate. And the official president pro tem right now is Chuck Grassley. It's the longest serving member of the majority party. Now that's written in the Senate rules. It's not in the Constitution. That's in the Senate rules. That's the temporary president, right? The acting president. But the actual president of the Senate is the vice president. And all of the things about what the president pro tem or what the president of the Senate can do and who runs the Senate, all of them basically start with this phrase, absent the presence of the vice president or the president of the Senate, the actual president of the Senate, there shall be blah-de-blah-de-blah. So, as I said to Congressman Pocan, I'm going to continue my research on this over the weekend. We've got a long weekend coming up here with Thanksgiving. And put it together. You'll recall it was back in March of this year that I started talking on this program. A friend of mine in Washington, D.C., an old conservative, made the comment to me that over at the White House, they were talking about the 12th Amendment. They were talking about having enough confusion in the election that individual states the state legislatures could simply appoint electors and make Donald Trump president. And, I published an op-ed about that, I believe in April, on Alternet and Raw Story and Salon and whatnot. And, and I asked Tom Perez about it on this program in April or May. And he was like, I've not heard anything about that. I'm not so worried. Our lawyers are good. They'll take care of everything, but I'm not worried about it. Well, it turns out that actually was their plan. And the way they were going to create the chaos was through destroying over 600 high-speed mail sorting machines in the post office. This was their plan. The guy who's the chair of the Postal Board of Governors is one of the largest Republican donors in the country, and the Postal Board of Governors, all Republicans now, they appointed Louis DeJoy as the Postmaster General, and he executed this plan, destroying over 600 multi-million-dollar high-speed sorting machines that can sort 40,000 pieces of mail an hour, and replacing them with postal workers doing it by hand and eliminating all overtime. So, of course, everything slowed down. So that was their plan. And, you know, it's kind of bittersweet or whatever that I was right about it from the beginning, and people were telling me I was crazy and dismissing me. Well, I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this one, right? I mean, this might be my biggest, you know, egg on the face. But I've sent out emails to several scholars of the Senate, and I've been trying to find any former Senate parliamentarians who will talk to me. And if you know anybody in that kind of a position, send me a DM over on Twitter, or tweet a message to me, or you know, if you've really got something that you think is solid, you can email me or Sean. My email address and Sean's are over on our website at thomhartmann.com. Just don't have a lot of political words in it, because my spam filter looks for certain political words, and you know, there's 3,700 emails in my spam filter right now, just from this month. So, but anyway, that's where I'm going forward. Where Trump is going forward is he's trying to burn down the damn country. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. He's not literally, but metaphorically. I mean, his treason extends far beyond his efforts to damage our belief in democracy. And, you know, this thing that, you know, his buddies in Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, et cetera, all, you know, regularly disparage. He's also damaging the ability of the incoming Biden administration to help Americans during the Trump depression and to get the virus in check. And in that, he has help from Steve Mnuchin and Mitch McConnell. McConnell won't let any legislation through that's going to put money in the pockets of average Americans. He wants there to be a depression that they will call the Joe Biden depression. I am convinced Mitch McConnell wants that to happen. And Steve Mnuchin just pulled back from the Fed $454 billion that the Fed could leverage into $7 trillion to buy corporate bonds and corporate stock. So the Fed is going to have to get out of the stock market if that, you know, if he pulls that off. Excuse me. And if so, well, this is what Senator Ron Wyden said, quote, as the economy backslides and skyrocketing COVID-19 cases, Secretary Mnuchin is engaged in economic sabotage and trying to tie the Biden administration's hands. And then on top of that, you know, he's tearing up our spy planes. I'll go through the whole list on the other side of the break, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. It really is remarkable, this time that we're living in. This is historic. This is every bit as historic as the election of 1800. We'll be right back with the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Exposing the con and conservative. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be right back.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the L.A. Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other, in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone and of his own accord would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize. Because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur.
Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So we've got a new video up over at ThomHartmann.com for folks who are supporting the program about how big pharma, the big pharmaceutical companies, might be the lever that the healthcare industry uses to destroy Medicare for all, or even a public option as we move into and toward the Biden administration. And how do they do that? Well, they're spending $30 billion a year on advertising. The United States is the only country in the world, the only developed country in the world, that allows drug companies to advertise with very, very few restrictions on television. Only one other country, New Zealand, allows any kind of drug advertising on television. But in the United States, the door is largely wide open. And as a result, all of the television networks are hooked on money from big pharma and big health, as it were. You can check out all the details over at thomhartmann.com with our new video for the supporters of our program. Thank you. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, some of the stuff that Trump is doing, we talked yesterday about, and Rachel Maddow, God bless her, twice in a row has been talking about something nobody else on television is discussing. Trump shutting down the program that helps us and Europe keep track of basically Russian troop movements, although it could be any renegade country. I mean, if Viktor Orban in Hungary decides to go nuts, we would know about it because of this Open Skies Treaty. Trump not only pulls us out of the treaty, but orders the planes destroyed. I mean, it's bizarre. Meanwhile, he's trying to burn down the civil service. He's got, over at the Office of Management and Budget, see, if you're a civil servant, you are protected. It's almost like being a union member. There are certain rules for the civil service. You can't just, a president or an administration can't just fire people in the civil service because they don't like them or they don't like their politics. They can only fire them for cause that has to do with job performance, or being a, if they went out and shot somebody or what, committing a crime, something like that. But 88% of the workers at the Office of Management and Budget, 425 people, are now in the crosshairs. Donald Trump is trying to reclassify them under what's called Schedule F, which means that they can be immediately fired. And then they will be replaced by people who are not Schedule F, which means that they will be replaced by Trump toadies who then have civil service protection and can't be fired by Joe Biden. And it's not just the OMB where he's doing this. He's doing this at agency after agency and, basically trying to burn down the country on his way out. And whether he's doing it because, President Putin told him to, or whether he's doing it because Mohammed bin Salman thought it was a good idea, or whether he's doing it because he just hates us because we didn't reelect him, or whether he's doing it because he's just a vicious, crazed maniac, God only knows. But he's doing it. Senator Ron Wyden talking about what Steve Mnuchin is trying to do, pulling back the $455 billion in COVID relief that is being used by the Fed to leverage these giant loans that are keeping our airlines flying and things like that. Wyden says as the economy backslides, Secretary Mnuchin is engaged in economic sabotage and trying to tie the Biden administration's hands. Donald Trump is trying to bring back the firing squad. There's a few people on federal death row right now. He's trying to hurry up their execution. Joe Biden is a good Catholic, and as such, he is personally pro-life, and that means he is opposed to the death penalty. In fact, prior to 1980, when the Protestant televangelists hooked up with Ronald Reagan and Bush the Elder, who were both advocates of women having the right to make the choice to have an abortion. Reagan bragged about having signed legislation that expanded abortion rights in California when he was running, or when he was governor. And George Herbert Walker Bush was on the board of Planned Parenthood, or a big supporter of Planned Parenthood, had written fundraising letters for them. He and his wife had worked with them for years and years. But both of them suddenly became anti-abortion in 1980 because they cut this deal with Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed and the so-called, and Pat Robertson, the so-called religious right. But prior to that, the right to life movement in the United States, and this went back to the 1800s. The right to life movement in the United States was the anti-death penalty movement. That's what they called themselves. The people who opposed capital punishment were called right to lifers, and it was called the right to life movement. So anyhow, what Trump is trying to do right now is he's trying to push through first of all, he's trying to kill as many people as he can, execute as many federal prisoners as possible. I am convinced this is a man who gets great pleasure when people die. I just can't come up with any other explanation for some of his behavior, including the way that he's watching as Americans die of COVID, number one. But number two, he's also trying to push through a regulation that would bring back firing squads. Let's shoot them. Honest to God, bring back the firing squads. He's also trying to weaken rules that protect you and me. For example, the Department of Agriculture right now has just notified food safety groups that they're going to put through a regulatory change to speed up the processing lines in chicken processing plants, which will lead to more worker injuries and will make it harder to stop things like salmonella. I mean, and it just goes on and on and on. There's a great piece over at Raw Story. It's actually a reprint from ProPublica, so actually you might want to just go to ProPublica.org and check it out. But it's also at Raw Story. The headline is Donald Trump is racing to weaken several laws and implement other last-minute policies before January 20th. This is just obscene. And then finally, U.S. aims to put pressure on banks to keep up fossil fuel lending. This from the Financial Times. U.S. banks that decide to stop lending to fossil fuel businesses could face penalties under a new rule proposed by the outgoing Trump administration. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is proposing the rule. In the past 12 months, banks including Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, TD Bank, and Deutsche Bank have said they will no longer finance new drilling projects in the Arctic, in Anwar. And, as a result of basically taking a moral position. And the Trump administration is saying, okay, you guys, you do that, we will punish you. It's mind-boggling. It's just mind-boggling. So anyhow, let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Leslie in Central Square, New York. Hey, Leslie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. This is very important. Just give me a minute or so, will you please? Sure. In this election, had 70 million Republicans voted. And in the Hillary, it was what, 30 million? And that's terrible. It's just going to keep progressing. And the fact it comes from, on like Fox News, not because they lie or anything, I watched 4 shows in a row screaming and hollering. It comes from the brainwashing. They go to that show for that hype. They don't even care if it's true or not. They don't care about none of that. They want that feeling. And they stick to whatever the line is. Vote for Trump or whatever, no matter what truth comes out anywhere else or lies. They don't care none about that. That hype is what drives them, okay? And if that doesn't stop, we'll never win an election again. We have to go after that and stop it. Fairness doctrine or what?
Yeah, I don't think the fairness doctrine is going to save us, but I do get what you're saying, and I think that we do need to be the Democrats and progressives need to be messaging better. The fact of the matter is that the Republicans have basically rigged the system. They've rigged the media. They've got this huge right-wing echo chamber. They have rigged a whole bunch of states so that even though the majority of people in Michigan, in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, and several other states vote for Democrats, for Congress, for the Senate, for the House, well, not so much the Senate, but for Congress and the House, and the governorship, you end up with Democratic governors because it's a statewide office, Democratic secretaries of state. Excuse me, but their representation in the House of Representatives and in their own legislatures is entirely Republican, even though they're minority Republican states. And those structural things are getting worse. They're going to get worse this year with redistricting, sadly, because the Democratic Party did not put a priority, actually didn't have the resources to put a priority on capturing some of these state houses. It's terrible. Leslie, thank you for the call. Ronnie in New Berlin, Wisconsin. Hey, Ronnie, what's up?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. With Thanksgiving here, I am so thankful for Stephanie, you, and my local Devil's Radio in Madison, Wisconsin. You guys have me so much more informed than I ever was. But I need your help trying to figure out the history of how the Democratic and Republican parties basically swapped sides and how the electors, how the people went along with this. Because it was, and basically I'm looking for books or something that you could recommend. I mean, like, the Republicans freed the slaves, but the Democrats fight for people of color today. And
that swap happened in 1964. July 2nd, 1964, when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act.
Right. But like, how do you, I mean, you don't really make an announcement, hey, we're Republicans, so we care about keeping the debt down and we want to lower taxes, whereas before we did this, or we're Democrats and we didn't care about people of color before and now we do. I don't get how
it was a 16-year process, Ronnie, and and ended with Ronald Reagan becoming president in 1980. But that 16-year process, Kevin Phillips chronicles it pretty well, actually, in one of his books. You'd have to pop through, your favorite bookseller. I'm sorry, I don't remember the title of his most recent book. But Kevin Phillips, who was a Republican and no longer is, does a good job of chronicling that time. Ronnie, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. Stick around. And welcome back. Brian in Anaheim, California. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I am on the hunt. I've got my blue paintball gun, and we are going to turn these 2 Georgia Senate seats blue. You know how you always tag us? Well, this is a game of freeze tag now. It's a freeze tag. We need to freeze the GOP at 50 seats, and to take the Senate. So I've actually set up a volunteer organization called Blue Georgia Senate for people who want these 2 seats to go blue and want to know how to do it. We've got information on phone banking, how to write compelling tweets, Facebook posts, letters to the editor, and links to Greg Palast articles and videos about the massive purge. I was honored to receive a letter, or a tweet rather, of reference from him on our work to protect the vote. May I list the site that I built, or should I just give my Twitter handle?
Sure.
Okay.
You're a regular caller, Brian. I'm going to trust you.
Okay. Yeah, it's bluegeorgiasenate.com. Okay, and Blue Georgia Senate is also producing a 5-minute short video. It's a short motivational drama designed to promote activism and get the blue team off their butts and let Georgia voters know they may have been purged. And we are going to need the big guns for this one, Tom. The bigger the guns, the greater the turnout. Okay, so first play, one of the roles in the show is a talk show host. Okay, so we are going to reach out to America's #1 progressive talk show host about this project. Now, I understand your wife, Louise, actually knows him quite well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Brian, if you're trying to get me on the air to jump into your scheme with you or your program,
no. I'm just playing around. I'm just playing around. But we are in this now. We are in this game. We compile our team. We make this video. We get it going viral. We get the word out to a whole new audience about the purge. As you know, there's all of 30 credible cases of voter fraud per year. The database companies that compile the purge list have birthdays and socials, and they deliberately do not match them because these purges aren't about preventing voter fraud. They're about preventing blacks from voting. And I don't think we should stand for that Jim Crow crap anymore, Tom. Yeah. And we need to let everyone in Georgia know.
I'm totally with you, Brian, and I wish you the very best in it. Thanks a lot for the call. Marjorie in Detroit. Hey, Marjorie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How you doing? I'm not in Detroit anymore. But anyway, I'm glad I'm off of work to be able to ask you this question. I've been listening to the stuff about the L Treaty, the planes that watch the country.
The Open Skies Treaty.
Yes. What did you call it again?
Open Skies.
Yeah, the open sky. Now, we know that it's been said that Trump is now destroying these weapons, all these planes. My question is, are these planes able to be rebuilt during the 4 years process of Biden being in his administration?
It's probably going to take 5 or 6 years to build these planes. First of all, the planes that they're destroying are 50 years old. They are old they're pre-747 kind of aircraft. They're 4-engine jets that were specially designed for the military, specifically for this kind of application, so that they could stay in the air for hours and hours and hours and take pictures of huge areas. So they're going to have to design a new plane, a modern plane, from scratch. Then they've got to come up with all the electronic equipment that goes in it from scratch. They've got to put out all those pieces for bid. They've got to decide who's going to build it. It's going to be, I can't imagine that this could be done in less than a couple of years.
I hear you. I hear you because you come into a break. Does that mean that's the end of that air treaty? That means that's the end of it?
Well, that means that it's the end of us and Europe being able to keep track of what Russia is up to, or Hungary or Poland if they decide to go rogue. Yeah, and that's a very dangerous thing, Marjorie. Thanks a lot for the call. I'm speaking at the Bioneers 2020 conference. It's running December 5th and 6th and 12th and 13th. My keynote is how all life is organized around democracy. Tickets are available at Bioneers.org, and there's a 20% discount with the code TOM, T-H-O-M. So Keisha Lance Bottoms, the mayor of Atlanta, is tweeting about how it took 8 days for a member of her family to get a COVID test back, and during that time, that person, who it turns out was positive, they didn't know for 8 days, that person infected 3 other people in their family. Had they simply known, they could have quarantined that person. Even Mick Mulvaney, you know, right-wing crazy, former Tea Party congressman, you know, acolyte of the Koch brother. Even Mick Mulvaney is saying this is unacceptable during a pandemic when his own kids couldn't get tested, or one of his kids. The other one got tested and it took 7 days to get the results back. He says this is unacceptable. We've got a whole video about why this is, where the ideology that's driving. This is beyond incompetence. This is actually ideological. A new video out about this for the supporters of our program. You can find it over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Keno in Lakeland, Florida. Hey, Keno, what's up?
Hey, Tom, your program is going to be good for America, because I think your idea of delving into these Senate rules is, to use an old phrase, pregnant with possibility. And
One hopes.
I want to throw out a phrase in Georgia. They should start using the phrase that people should vote for the Democratic senators for the health of it. Because the Republicans had Congress the first 2 years of the Trump administration, and they bellyached about Obamacare, but they did nothing to bring in a new reform system. So I would, I'm Keno the Moose Herder, Republican who wants reform in the party, and I'm strongly for Biden. And I want the people in Georgia that are listening to start saying, you know, vote for the Democratic senators for the health of it, and give the Democrats 2 years, just like the Republicans failed in their 2 years with Trump. So so good luck on your looking into those Senate rules, Tom. That, like I say, that's going to bring about good results for the Vice President and the Biden administration.
Thank you, Keno, and yes, spot on. For the health of it. It's a great play on words. I love it. Thank you very much for the call, and good luck. David in Sacramento. Hey, David, what's up? David in Sacramento, listening on Sirius XM? No, David. I'm going to put David on hold. He's been there. He's been sitting on line 4 for a little bit of time there, Joyce, so if you want to find out what's going on with him. Greg in Detroit. Hey, Greg, you're on the air. What's up?
Thank you for taking my call. I just had 2 points. What do you think of Biden trying to get the fairness doctrine, enforcing the fairness doctrine, and possibly them working on the Telecommunications Act to try to reverse these big networks of right-wing radios and these networks of owning multiple radio stations in the same market, where they're just flooded with all this right-wing kind of propaganda? And then second, what do you think of Joe Biden having a monthly town hall, say on the 1st of every month, as a way to communicate? Because like Bernie used to say, well, Obama was elected, but then he kind of didn't. He said, okay, thank you, I have it from here, and he went and did his agenda, which was fine, and he was working hard for us, but you didn't hear about, like, Mitch McConnell holding back all his work that he was trying to get done. And if Joe Biden communicated every month to the American people, they would get to know him, trust him. And
yeah, I think once a week.
Doing what he's doing.
I think he should do a weekly fireside chat kind of thing. Somebody called and suggested that to Congressman Pocan last week, and I thought it was a great idea, and I totally agree. Franklin Roosevelt did that through much of the Great Depression and all of World War II. And I think, you know, we got we got too much from Trump. You know, we're getting 30 tweets a day. We got not enough from Obama. We go entire months without hearing from him. I think once a week is reasonable, and I would like to get back to a government where I don't wake up every morning and start compulsively hitting the news feeds to see what fresh hell the president has rolled out. You know, it's just.
But he needs to have it at the same time every week or every month, so that people just know, okay, on the 1st or on Friday he's going to come out, so they can look forward to it. Yeah. So they can get that.
And hopefully
it
gets high enough ratings that all the networks will want to carry it too. I mean, you know, yes.
Exactly.
And with regard to the FCC, I think that they need to bring back Title II. They need to bring back net neutrality, and they also need to look at antitrust rules, ownership rules, the old ownership rules that Bill Clinton blew up with the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Those need to be brought back. Some of them are going to have to be brought back by Congress. Some can probably be done by an act, by executive order. We'll see. Greg, thanks for the call. Carla in Brooklyn, New York. I think we have just a little over a minute until the end of the hour. Carla, what's up?
Oh, my, so much to say, so little time. Then I'm going to stick to my point. I was watching Joe Scarborough on, not Morning Joe, but he was on The View, and I found him to be more sensible at that point, because on his show sometimes he kind of irritates me. As to his reasoning and logic. But, you know, he said some good things. He was saying that he was speaking about the Democratic, not the Democratic Party, he was basically talking about the Republican Party and their all of their pro-fascist actions. And not only did he, you know, use the word, but he defined and explained all of that. So that was very refreshing, because I find the mainstream media does not say, you know, explain what the Republican Party has been doing for the past 4 years.
And Joe is promoting his book on Harry Truman, and Harry Truman called Republicans fascists. That may have something to do with it.
Wow.
Well, what was your point, Carla?
Okay.
We just have 30 seconds here.
Okay, yeah, that was the main thing. But then he went back into the Democrats and them using the words socialism and defund the police, and you know, when he should know better than it's not socialism in the traditional sense of socialism, and you're not saying defund the police. They've been saying reform the police. We want better health care. I mean, look at the, I think the Dakotas and Florida, they voted for progressive interest, higher minimum wage, allowing felons to vote, making marijuana legalized. So the notion that the people do not want more progressive policy.
Carla, I'm sorry, we're flat out of time. We'll be back with the next hour in just a minute.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are X-Chair, changing the world of seating. More info at xchairtom.com. Gabby.com. Gabby takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouth-watering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. Boll and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bollandbranch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten thinks economic debt, Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program, just you and me. Greg Olear, who I follow on Twitter, Gregolear, I may be mispronouncing his name, but whatever, tweeted just an absolutely brilliant tweet. I mean, you know, it popped up over on DU. I saw it on Twitter. It's getting around, as they say. And it's just brilliant. He says, it's done as a quote, right? Like as if quoting somebody, and then there's at the very end is the punchline saying who said it, right? Okay, so here it is. The jerk who broke into our house with help from our adversaries, stole our money, got us sick with plague that killed grandma, caged children, poisoned the environment, gaslighted us, subjected us to abuse, and held us hostage for 4 years should not be investigated. End of quote. Said no one ever. But it really does, you know, summarize. We have had 4 years of basically a mob boss, a crime boss, running the White House, demanding loyalty from people the way mob bosses do, trashing people who dare to speak up or have an independent thought the way mob bosses do, having, when he introduces his cabinet and brings in the press, having them go person to person and each one of them talk about how wonderful he is, the way mob bosses do. His kids are behaving like the children of mob bosses, entitled, rich, arrogant. We have had an organized crime figure in the White House for 4 years. He has, we know, taken over $100 million of taxpayer dollars and deposited them into his properties by constantly visiting his own properties and requiring the Secret Service to go along with him to rent rooms, to rent golf carts, to pay $3 a glass for a glass of tap water. I mean, you know, it's obscene. He had the General Services Administration refuse to let the FBI move out to Virginia and build a brand new building that would have been, you know, larger and accommodate their needs, because their old building in D.C., they had just hugely grown out of it. It's across the street from the Trump Hotel. They were going to tear that building down and sell that lot, and Marriott and Hilton were interested in bidding on it. And so, you know, Emily Murphy, I think her name is, over at the General Services Administration, the woman who up until, yesterday or the day before said, you guys can't have any transition money. I'm blocking it. She's making $190,000 a year to do this. She's the one who said, no, the FBI, they're good where they are. They don't need to move to Virginia. We'll just renovate the building. It's all good. Don't worry. And then when she went before Congress, she was asked explicitly, did you do this because Donald Trump didn't want competition for his hotel? Are you doing this because you're a Trump humper? And she was like, oh, no, Trump has nothing to do with this. And now we know from people inside the GSA and from witnesses who were there that actually she did do it to protect Donald Trump's financial interests. He's a mob boss. He's been taking money from foreign oligarchs all over the world, and laundering it through real estate. I mean, who else? There's very few people in America. I mean, literally, this is very seriously. This is something that pops up in a news story every now and again. And every time I see it, I'm like, oh my God, why is this not the headline? I realize it was, back in the day, 15 years ago when it first started coming out. But you cannot find a real estate developer in America where if you walk in to buy a condo or a property, say it's got an appraised value of $40 million, and you walk in with $50 million in $100 bills in cash, they will take your money. They won't do it. There are laws against that. There are laws that are very rarely enforced, but there are laws against that. And it turns out that both internal banking security people and people at the Treasury Department have flagged a number of these transactions where Trump, over the years, where Trump has been laundering cash for criminal figures in countries whose names end with Stan, or or Russian or Ukrainian oligarchs, or even mob figures, organized crime figures from Africa and Asia, where they have flagged these transactions and said, hey, there's something going on here. Here's a $20 million cash transaction. There's something not right about that. And in every case, Trump has been able to pull strings and get the investigations dropped or ignored. In every case. Now, my personal opinion is his luck is running out. I hope that's true. But, we have had a mob boss running our country. And what happens when you have a mob boss running your country? Well, last week, another 778,000 Americans lost their jobs and filed for unemployment. Every single one of those people is a tragedy. People lost their jobs. They lost their income. They will soon lose their homes. They will find it hard to find things to eat. Here in Portland, we're seeing a dramatic increase in homelessness. At the same time that the mayor, Ted Wheeler, is trying to open homeless shelters and take down some of these encampments. I mean, we got little cities growing around here of people living in tents. And, particularly when they butt up against neighborhoods, it gets pretty freaky because you start seeing crazy crime and stuff. Our next door neighbor, a homeless person was in her backyard using the hose to take a shower, basically. We need facilities. These are human beings. But, since the Reagan era, we have stopped taxing rich people to pay for services for everybody else. And we have seen this explosion in homelessness. And now, another 778,000 people in 1 week. In 1 friggin' week. We've got 20 million people in this country drawing unemployment. And about 10 million of them are going to lose it the week after Christmas if Congress doesn't reauthorize money. This is what you get when you've got a mob boss running your country. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about, he may be upset with me for saying this on the radio, but by and large, he doesn't care about any of that stuff. He just cares about how much money he can make and how much of it he can shovel to his kids, giving Ivanka, close to $1 million a year in consulting fees so that he can write it off his taxes, which is illegal. But hey, he's a mob boss. And meanwhile, over at the university, the George Washington University in St. Louis at their Olin Business School, they've got one of the better COVID forecasting models. It has been very, very solid throughout the entire epidemic or pandemic here in the United States, the epidemic. And they are forecasting that between now and the time that Joe Biden is inaugurated on January 20th, which is what, about 7 weeks from now? 8 weeks from now? I think 7 weeks from now? In that period of time, the number of people with COVID in the United States is going to double. This is, I'm hearing it from my kids who work in the hospital. I'm hearing it from callers. I'm hearing it from people all over the place that our hospitals are straining. They're starting to buckle. And it's fixing to double. Donald Trump is not just burning the country down. He's not just, ruining the government. He's not just, putting blindfolds over our spy planes as he tears them up. He's also actually encouraging Americans to die. This morning on MSNBC, there was a nurse on talking about the large number of patients who come in with COVID and make their way to the ICU. They're dying, literally. A large percentage of them are going to die. And gasping, insisting, I don't have COVID. There's no such thing. It's just a flu, This can't be. I've got to have something. It must be lung cancer. Please, check me out for something else because it couldn't be COVID. The president told me it's nothing to worry about. Hey, give me that drug Donald Trump got. Just let me pop out of here. And then they die.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And that's what happens when you have an organized crime figure who becomes president of the United States because he tried a publicity stunt to make more money. And welcome back. Let's see here. Ken in Lafayette, Colorado. Hey, Ken, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. And I really appreciate everything you do, and Mr. Pocan, et cetera. I'm calling just to rant, basically, and your last comment there is a good segue on how the hospitals are bursting at the seams with all these COVID cases. So just recently, our Governor Polis had issued some new. We're at red level, as far as COVID warnings, and Weld County, which is north and east of me, is basically said we are not going to enforce, these new restrictions around COVID, and it's rogue counties, it's rogue officials, like we have here in Weld County, as do Michigan, and a lot of this are the main reason why our hospitals are busting at the seams.
There are two big things. There are four things that you can point to that epidemiologists have pointed to, and you can say we can prove that a really large part, we don't know what percentage, whether it's 30% or 50% or 90%, but a really large percentage of this massive epidemic across the United States of COVID originated from just a few events. There was the Sturgis motorcycle rally where 400,000 people got together, got infected, and then spread back out all across the United States, number one. Number two, there has been a series of about 25 or 30 Trump rallies, and every one of those counties where one of these rallies occurred, there was an explosion in COVID cases in the weeks following, and then, of course, they spread out from there. And then number three, you've got a couple of holidays. The 4th of July, 2 weeks after the 4th of July, we saw a burst. You had Memorial Day. After that, or Veterans Day, rather. Memorial Day, too. After each one of these holidays, there's been an explosion. And there will be an explosion after Thanksgiving. The airports are running at 60% of capacity right now, which is insane. And there was this woman on TV last night who was like, I'm going to visit my parents. They're 80, 88, and 90. And I am being very, very careful as I go through the airport because when I see them, I'm going to knock on their door. They don't even know I'm coming, and I'm going to reach out and hug them both. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. Oh, my God. This woman is going to kill her parents.
Weld County has, I think it's JBS Meatpacking Company. They're the largest meatpacking, I think, in the state of Colorado. This company had hundreds of COVID cases from their employees, and they did very little, if anything, to mitigate the problem. And it's like you say, these super spreader events, and it's companies like JBS and officials in Weld County and others who are laughing at the face of a worldwide pandemic, and it's just a disgrace. All I did was wanted to rant, and thank you for all you do. Thank you for keeping reality at top of mind for everyone. I really appreciate everything. I just wanted to rant, basically, and tell people that.
Well, you did, Ken.
This is no hope.
And you did a fine job. And this is the message people need to hear: is that this virus is real. And by the way, Limbaugh and all these guys. Well, you only have a 2% chance of dying. Yeah, but you may have a 20 or 30 or 40% chance of having a stroke or heart, or permanent heart damage or kidney damage or dementia. It turns out to be one of the side effects. 1 1/5 of people who have had symptomatic COVID within 90 days are showing signs of mental illness. I mean, this is a serious disease. Ken, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. We're available on SiriusXM, Free Speech TV, Pacifica, commercial stations nationwide, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, on the Thom Hartmann app, and you can even tell your smart speaker to listen to the Thom Hartmann Program. So if you are a middle class, working class, whatever you want to call it, person in the United States, and you own your own home, which is, I believe, a little over 60% of American families, every year you pay a wealth tax. You pay a tax on what is, for the vast majority of Americans, their largest single asset. Your single largest asset, your home. It's called a property tax, but it's a tax you pay on wealth every year. You got a house worth $100,000, you pay a 1% property tax, you're going to pay $1,000 a year, whatever it may be. I mean, you know, and property tax is very typically higher than 1%. So why is it that if working class people are paying a wealth tax every year on their principal assets, why aren't billionaires paying a tax on their principal assets? Well, California's fixing to change that, or maybe, and I've got a piece up over at thomhartmann.com about it. You can check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your phone calls. David in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, David, what's on your mind?
Tom, on Monday, you relayed a story about the Georgia special election and how they're trying to tie vehicle registration into the ability to vote in that. I haven't seen anything else about that in the news this week, and I was wondering if you could give me an update.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. You can get all the information, by the way, at Greg Palast website, gregpalast.com. He's got a couple of good stories on it. What happened was, I think it was Sunday night, the Republican Party in Georgia, or the Georgia legislature, excuse me, the Georgia Republicans, their legislative Republicans, proposed 3 rule changes for the upcoming election on January 5th. Where Kelly Loeffler is running against Reverend Warnock, and where David Perdue is running against John Ossoff. And 2 of those rule changes were fairly non-controversial tweaks to just make things work better. And the third was that if a vote is challenged, and of course there's Republican poll watchers who sit there and challenge every vote they possibly can when they know that they're coming from a heavily Democratic area. If a vote is challenged, then they can go back to the voter and demand proof that they're actually residents of Georgia, and the principal proof that they would accept would be a car having been registered in Georgia and a current Georgia driver's license. And lacking a current Georgia driver's license, they would have to have a car registered in Georgia. So they put this rule together, and it was going to be voted on Monday afternoon. Greg Palast called me up Monday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, "You won't believe what happened about 6 hours ago, in the middle of the night in the Georgia legislature. And, can we get together and come on your show and talk about it?" I put Greg on the air that Monday. He was our first guest. We started the show with it. And, Greg told that story to our 7 million listeners. And within a few hours, the Georgia legislature backed down on that rule. They're still trying to push, more restrictions. They're trying to figure out ways to invalidate people's votes, because that's the game. That's the game they've been playing for 200 years there in Georgia. But that particular part has been held at bay so far. So far as we know. So you can read all about it over on Greg's website.
Okay, so there's thousands of college students in Georgia getting driver's licenses.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out, or how it's going to work, or who's going to do what. But I do know that when it hit our show, it hit the fan, as it was, as they say, in Georgia. And we're on SiriusXM, we're on radio stations all over the country. We've got listeners in Georgia, and apparently a whole bunch of people said, "What?" And Greg, in fact, Greg was, we were on Rob Call. Rob Call, who publishes opednews.com. Rob has a podcast, and Greg and I were both on his podcast yesterday or the day before, and Greg referenced that. He said, boy, the response to that show was amazing, which was cool. I mean, it's not real often that I get feedback, immediate feedback from people about, whether what we're doing here is actually having an impact on the real world. That one did. So that's good news, in my opinion. David, I got to move along. Thank you for the call, and thanks for the question. Steve in Cooperstown, New York. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Yes, Tom. I wanted to make a comment about an unconscious process that was present in Adolf Hitler. And before he committed suicide, he instructed his generals, I believe it was Berlin, to destroy all of Berlin and the people in it. And, of course, many of them refused to do that. And it's considered to be, analytically speaking, it's quite an unconscious process. And people can infer anything they want from that in regards to this current president. I can recall when he was running for president, there were many elderly people who had survived the Holocaust who were writing into the New York Times that this man had many similar characteristics and issues that Hitler himself had. So, Tom, thank you very much for everything you do. You have a great show, and I really enjoy listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, I think this is a very real thing, this syndrome, and I don't think that I think it's far more frequent than people realize. Louise and I started this community for abused kids up in New Hampshire back in 1978, and then we started a school there. And when we left, we hired a person to take it over to run it. She ran it for a few years, and then and we were still on the board of directors. One day basically called us up and said, I'm shutting the program down. And we were like, why? And she was like, because I'm retiring, I'm leaving, and it won't continue without me. And so we quickly found somebody to replace her and rebooted it. But she had already, basically, hadn't quite gotten to the point of selling the furniture, but was damn close. I think that there's this idea that some people have that if I can't have it, or if I can't run it, or if it's not mine, then it has to go away. And I think that Trump is thinking that way about American democracy. And you're absolutely right about Adolf Hitler. An old friend of mine was the 16-year-old courier who delivered the news to him that the war was lost, and wrote a book about it. His name is Armin Lehman. The book was in the Führer's bunker, or in Hitler's bunker. And the same thing. Steve, thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I mean, I believe we see this. There's this thing called founders syndrome, too. We see this in businesses. We see it in nonprofits. We're seeing it right now in the White House.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
I'm speaking at the Bioneers 2020 conference. It's running December 5th and 6th and 12th and 13th. My keynote is how all life is organized around democracy. Tickets are available at Bioneers.org, and there's a 20% discount with the code THOM, T-H-O-M. Did you know that there have been 8 federal judges who have been convicted and removed from the federal bench? 15 altogether have been impeached. 8 have been removed from office since the beginning. 3 of them since 1988, including one judge, Thomas Porteous down in Louisiana, who was impeached and removed from office for signing false financial declarations under penalty of perjury, which it turns out it looks like Clarence Thomas did for quite a number of years when he did not disclose, as he is required by law to do, that his wife was taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Heritage Foundation. That and his perjury around Anita Hill and others, there were numerous witnesses that didn't even get called, could legitimately spark an impeachment of Clarence Thomas. We got a video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. Check it out. Welcome back. The Georgia Secretary of State. This is astonishing. Brad, I think his name is Brad Raffensperger, Perjure. Yeah, Brad Raffensperger. I remember the first time Greg Palast said that it was on this show. Because the Georgia Secretary of State is in charge of purging the names off the list, and he says, "Yeah, the new Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger." And I was like, "You mean burger, right? Like Raffensperger?" No, Perjure. Yes, that's his name, Brad Raffensperger. Maybe when Brian Kemp hired him, he thought, "Hey, a guy whose name is Perjure, perfect. Let's make him Secretary of State." I mean, he didn't hire him; it's an elected position, but the Republican Party, whatever. But anyway, this is what Raffensperger had to say. He said. He was talking about how we had a record 1.3 million voters cast ballots by absentee mail, another 2.7 in person. He said this is Georgia's gold standard, 3 weeks of early voting. Around 1 million people waited in lines averaging a minuscule 3 minutes on Election Day. By all accounts, writes the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, by all accounts, Georgia had a wildly successful and smooth election. We finally defeated voting lines and put behind us Fulton County's now notorious reputation for disastrous elections. This should be something for Georgians to celebrate, whether their favored presidential candidate won or lost. For those wondering, mine lost. My family voted for him, we donated to him, and we are now being thrown under the bus by him. Honest to God, this is a tweet from the Georgia Secretary of State. And then Mark Judson for Congress replies going, LOL, after watching Trump for the past 4 years, you expected something different? Yeah, really. Meanwhile, Rupert Murdoch is a little alarmed that Trump has been trashing Fox News. And so they're thinking of paying him off. They're having serious discussions among the Murdoch family about giving Donald Trump $100 million. And in exchange for that, they'll make him a regular contributor to Fox News, or maybe even give him his own show. And HarperCollins will publish his memoir, his presidential memoir, $100 million. Just be nice to Fox News, please. This is how bizarre it's gotten. Jeff in Jacksonville, Florida. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind?
Oh, perfect segue. I'm 53 years old, and for most of my life, I've heard this term called a liberal media bias. And I haven't really witnessed it, and I'm wondering if you can shine a light on it. It seems like, even the last 4 years, Trump can make a speech reading off a prompter and not look crazy, and they say, oh my God, that was presidential. But then they won't talk about all the lies he tells every other time he gets in front of a microphone. And it seems like most of the media, other than, let's say, Fox, trips over themselves to show both sides of things. And I'm just curious, do they say that to delegitimize other media, or what's your idea on this?
Well, there's actually a fairly easily documented history of this, Jeff. Before the Republican Party had Frank Luntz, the guy who came up, the Walton family, for example, paid him $250,000 to come up with a new term for the estate tax, and he came up with the death tax. And that helped them, lobby Congress to get the estate tax dropped dramatically. The richest family in America, one of the richest families in the world. But before Frank Luntz, there was Lee Atwater. Lee Atwater was the guy back in the 70s who worked for Nixon, in the 80s worked for Reagan. And Lee Atwater came up with this concept that they should, it was called play the refs. He said, in a football game, one of the jobs of the coach is to work the refs. So you're constantly yelling at the referees, hey, that wasn't a right call, you didn't do that. You try to distract them, you try to throw them off their game, you try to get them to throw, when they're throwing penalties on the field, to try and do it in a way that will help you and hurt the other team. And make sure that, particularly if the other team does something wrong, that the refs know about it. And so Lee Atwater came up with this idea that the Republican Party needed to start working the refs. And another Republican operative, whose name escapes me at the moment, but it'll probably come to me. He once walked up to me with a microphone, stuck it in my face, and said something outrageous. But he started this organization that was to out liberal bias in the media. So whenever there was any little tiny story that suggested that Republicans weren't doing things well, or the Democrats are doing really great stuff, it would become one of his headlines, and he would get Republican politicians to complain about this on the floor of the House, on the floor of the Senate. They'd go on TV and complain about each one of these little incidents. And over a period of a few years, and this started in the late 70s, but it really picked up steam by 84, they had established in the mind of America that that the media had a left tilt. And then when Rush Limbaugh started his show in 88, I believe it was, 87 or 88, it was in 87 when Reagan blew up the Fairness Doctrine, and Rush Limbaugh started his show a year later. And this became a central tenet of Limbaugh's show. He became the big evangelist for Lee Atwater's pitch, and is to this day, actually. He calls it the drive-by media now, but it's gone through several incarnations. But it was always a mythology, and and tragically a mythology that Americans have bought into. The fact of the matter is that most of the media in the United States is controlled by very large corporations. Most of those very large corporations, to the extent that they are political, are relatively conservative. The family that owns Comcast, for example, that owns NBC and MSNBC, is one of the most right-wing in the country. You've got two major, now three major, if you include Salem, three major radio networks owned and controlled by conservatives that are running hundreds. I mean, there's 1,500 right-wing radio stations in the country. There's hundreds of right-wing local hosts. I mean, there may be 50 local progressive hosts in the country, if that. Right. There's hundreds of these right-wing hosts. I mean, I go to the conventions. I'm the only liberal. Every year I go to the Talkers Convention. I've been doing this for 16 years now. Every year I go to the Talkers Convention in New York City, where all the talk show hosts get together. There's typically 300, 400, 500 people there. And every year it's me and Joe Madison and, maybe Randy Rhoads will show up or Leslie Marshall. There's a couple of other progressives who might show up. And I'm always the one on the panel who, be 6 right-wing hosts and me, doing a knockdown, drag-out demonstration of how to do talk radio for everybody else. And the liberal media in this country is what you're listening to right now, Jeff. You're listening to the Progress Channel on Sirius XM, and it's literally the only way that in any red state in this country that I know of. We do have an affiliate in Columbus, Ohio, so Ohio's a red state. But in most of the red states, there are no progressive outlets. And the only way that you can get progressive talk radio is by having a Sirius satellite receiver, or now they've got online accounts where you can get it on your
Free Speech TV on Roku or something. Yeah, but thank you.
And Free Speech TV simulcasts it, but that's television, not radio. But I mean, the liberal media in the United States is a pretty small slice. I mean, people say to me, "Hey, you're the #1 progressive talk show host in America." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's like being the biggest frog in the smallest pond." So, but yeah, that's how it came about, Jeff. And I am hopeful that as time goes on, progressive media is starting to get a toehold. People are starting to learn about free speech TV. They're starting to learn about the Progress Channel 127 on Sirius XM, which is just one of the very best places. They've got some great hosts. Stephanie Miller precedes me. Dino Badal in the afternoon is great. Michelangelo. I mean, there's just they've just got some great hosts. Some of the Pacifica stations, some really great people. Sonali out of KPFK. And we're on KPFK, we're on a bunch of these stations, the nonprofit stations. But it's all on the margins. The main media in the United States, 1,500 radio stations, almost 300 television stations owned by Sinclair or owned by Fox. And Fox actually fired some reporters down in Florida for reporting that a bovine growth hormone might cause cancer. And they sued, and Fox took it to court, and the court said, you may legally instruct your news reporters to lie to the people. That's your free speech right as a corporation. You can find that case. It's the Fox RGBH suit. You can look it up. It's easy to Google. But all right, liberal media in America, no, not so much. Jeff, thanks a lot for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
But slowly but surely, we're growing. We're getting bigger and better and stronger. And please, if you're listening to us right now, support your media. And welcome back. Let's see here. Edward in Sierra Madre, California. Hey, Edward, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, to all the friends and families listening over the airwaves. Anyways, Tom, your point about Vice President Harris, I think it's a great idea. We have to push back any way we can. I mean, obviously, the real problem is the Republican Party, the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and Trump's just a byproduct of this. I mean, he's a crazy degenerate, but, he's a product. They chose this guy. So we have to push back. We have to use every tool in our toolbox, and I totally agree with you. Whether or not it works, I know you're going to do a deep dive on it, but, we got to come at him because this is a battle. This is not, it's not over.
This is for the soul of America. And for democracy worldwide, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. We're the gold. We were the gold standard. We still are. This is not, and we can't worry about those that voted for him. We just have to come out in greater numbers. And I realize that is not the ultimate answer, because even if we won by one vote, that's all that should matter. But we have to get out the vote. We have to get more people voting so we can change the situation we are currently in for the long haul, for the long term. I mean, I agree with you, and thank you for what you do. Your whole staff there, you guys are doing the Lord's work. If you'll allow me.
Edward, I got to move along, but thank you. Thank you for your kind words, and spot on. I totally agree. Yeah, I appreciate it. Alfredo in Mountain View, California. Hey, Alfredo, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. Yeah, you were talking yesterday about where would the Trump library should be built, and I wanted to ask you pertaining to monuments. I mean, this wall that he erected on the border is a monument to racism and Trump. Do you think?
Well, he's only built 3 miles of it, Alfredo. He's saying he built 145 miles, but 142 of those miles were actually renovation and reconstruction of existing wall. He only built 3 miles of new wall, and people are regularly jumping over it. It's fairly easy to climb.
Are they going to tear this down?
I don't know. The thing that concerns me is that he's going where he doesn't have to buy land from property owners, because he's getting a lot of pushback in Texas, and so there's this huge wildlife area that's really important to wildlife in Mexico and in North America. And they were going to try and build their wall right through the middle of that. And that's where they built the first 3 miles. And I don't know how badly they've damaged that wildlife area, but if that's where the wall has been built inside that wildlife area, it does need to be ripped up, and that needs to be returned to its natural state, to the extent that it can be. You know, we'll see. We'll see. This is probably a little lower on the priority list for Joe Biden than, you know, getting the economy back together and saving the lives of a few, you know, million people. But it's just another statement of the gross racism that permeates the Republican Party. We'll be right back. The Hidden History of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. In our special video over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, the one today is for anybody who has any connection, or for this week, anybody who has any connection with the military or anybody in the military who might still think that Donald Trump is a good guy. And I'm going through, like, I don't know how many, 20, 30, 40, 50 individual data points of times when Trump has trashed our troops, when Trump has deported troops, when Trump has deported military spouses who aren't citizens, when Trump has lied to our troops, when Trump has, specifically pulled money from our troops. I mean, he took money out of military housing, which is in some parts of the country, you know, mold infested and really in a crisis, to build his border wall that Mexico is supposed to pay for. As just one example. So there's a whole list of these things in that new video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com, especially for anybody you know who has any consideration or concern at all for our U.S. military. Welcome back. Lincoln in El Cerrito, California. Hey, Lincoln, what's on your mind?
Hey there, Tom. Thanks for all you do. I have a question. Do you have a definition of socialism? Is it a redistribution of wealth back outwards from the consolidation of money upwards into the accounts of the wealthy, or is it about who controls that redistribution, such as organized labor, or is it something else entirely? Thank you.
It's all of the above and all of the above, including something else entirely, Lincoln, and that's the problem, and that's why it's so easy for Republicans to use it as a cudgel. You know, socialism, as a broad term, comes out of the notion that society takes care of itself. That one of the purposes of government is to provide for the society's needs, for the social needs, to make sure that people get what they need. Karl Marx redefined it in, I think it was 1856 was the year that Capital was first published. And I think it was, in fact, I think it was the late 1830s when the Communist Manifesto was published. But anyhow, he redefined it. In fact, he wrote letters, he and Abraham Lincoln wrote letters about this. He redefined socialism as meaning what you and I today call communism. What the Soviet Union had, what under the Castro brothers Cuba had. Cuba is moving away from that to a slightly more free market system. Louise and I were down there a year ago, March, for a week or so, and it was fascinating. And the Soviet Union has collapsed. China has reinvented that to be basically state capitalism. But so Marx's capitalism pretty much doesn't exist. The only place it's ever worked were small communities. Religious communities, kibbutzes in Israel, things like that, where it's a small enough community that everybody knows everybody, so nobody can cheat. But once a community gets, or a society gets large enough for people to cheat, socialism doesn't work because it relies on trust. And then you get predators who emerge, and you end up with the Soviet Union. Now, add to this mix the fact that the Scandinavian countries, you know, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, refer to themselves as democratic socialist countries. And the other northern European countries, Germany, France, Spain, they refer to themselves as social democracies. And so if you were to ask, you know, any of these folks, do you believe in socialism? You know, it would depend on the context. You know, they would say if you're talking about Soviet socialism, no, it doesn't work. If you're talking about socialism the way it works in Denmark, hey, we've got the happiest people on earth. You know, they're the most highly functional society. Denmark's economy is doing well. You know, people are not, you know, and not just Denmark, all across the country. So my personal definition of socialism is let's take care of people. And personally, I would think, and I would say if somebody asked me, that I think we need more socialism. The socialism that we have so far is our police departments, our fire departments, our public roads, in some cases, you have about half of the water systems and electric systems in the country are municipally owned. They're owned by the people. That is socialism. Our military is the most socialist institution in the United States. Our military hospitals, the VA hospitals, the doctors are actually employees of the government, and the hospitals are owned by the government. That's pure socialism. And Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security are all forms of socialism. And I would say that we need a little bit more of that. Our social safety net is not strong enough. We have too many people falling through it. It's why we have all this homelessness, why we have tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths every year. We have people, you know, in extreme distress, you know, emotionally and psychologically because they live in basically a crisis constantly because the social safety net is not enough. And Franklin Roosevelt really tried to take a run at this, you know, not using the word socialism back in that day, but it wasn't quite the evil word then. But he tried to take a run at it with his Second Bill of Rights, where he said that, you know, a place to live should be a right, a good job should be a right, health care should be a right, education should be a right. We should make all these things if they're not provided by our capitalist system. If the capitalist system fails to provide these things, the government should step in and be the backstop. And I completely agree with that. And I think that, you know, and you can call that socialism, or you can call it democratic socialism, or you can call it just, you know, once we do it, the American way. I mean, that's the Canadian way, for example. You know, every person in Canada is covered. Healthcare is a right in Canada. Housing is a right in Canada. You know, they don't have these problems, you know, as many of the problems as we have here. Certainly they have some. But am I doing a decent job here, Lincoln, of explaining this? Am I making sense?
You're doing a great job. I mean, unfortunately for the conversation, there are so many ways of misusing this stuff, but I very much appreciate what you've done. Yeah. In 1969, a bunch of us met with Fidel Castro and asked him, what about the right to freedom of speech? And he said, well, here in Cuba, we believe that people have rights to housing, medical care, food, education. That in the United States, you believe that the Second Amendment is that the right to dispute these things, education, etc., is the most important right.
Yeah, I know that, and I'm not a fan of Castro's form of communism or socialism, if you want to call it that, but I do think that there is a middle ground, and that's what we need to be looking at and talking about. Lincoln, thank you for the call, and thank you for being with us today. Have a great holiday, and be good to yourself and others, and be very, very careful. Please don't spread this virus. Get out there, get active, but do it from home, okay? Tag, you're it. Have a great one.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are X-Chair, changing the world of seating. More info at xchairtom.com. Gabby.com. Gabby takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at gabby.com/Tom. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouth-watering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. Boll & Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bollandbranch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.